Good evening, friends. I am indeed very happy to be here with you today and see such a massive turnout of young people on an issue of such great importance. It is really heartening to see the youth of this country and of Kerala in particular turning up in such large numbers to engage with the most important issues of our time, namely the development paradigm or the development model that is being followed by this government in this country, to try and understand what is wrong with this model, what are the problems that it has created, where is it leading the country, and what needs to be done to change this model, and how the youth of this country can participate in bringing about this revolution by changing the whole model of development that is being followed in this country. If you try and understand what is the model of development that the rulers of this country have chosen, you only have to listen to the Prime Minister, and whenever the Prime Minister talks about development in this country, he only talks about the rate of GDP growth. For him, development only means GDP growth. That means the growth in the gross domestic product or in the national income of this country. He takes great pride in saying that since he became finance minister in 1991, the growth rate of GDP in this country has grown from 3 to 4% to almost 9% today. He considers this to be a great achievement. But if you try and understand what is this GDP growth, how has this GDP growth been achieved, and who benefits from this GDP growth, and at whose cost this GDP growth has been achieved, what you find is that since 1991, when this country was made to embark upon this neoliberal model of economic development, which is called structural adjustment, which was called structural adjustment by the World Bank and the IMF, and which is known as the LPG program, the liberalization, privatization and globalization program. What we find is that since 1991 till today, in the last 20 years, it is true that the GDP in this country has grown many-fold. It is true that the rate of GDP growth has increased from 3 to 4% to 9%. But during the same time, in the last 20 years, poverty in this country has increased for a greater and greater number of people in this country. According to Arjun Sen Gupta, one of the main official economists of the government, he says in his report about 4 years ago that 78% of the people of this country live on less than 20 rupees a day. Utsa Patnaik, one of the leading economists of this country from Jawaharlal Nehru University, says that between 1991 and 2005, not only the absolute number of people who are hungry, who do not get adequate food, but even the percentage of the population who do not get adequate food in this country, who do not have access to enough food in this country, has grown considerably. At the same time, during the last 20 years, we are seeing that India's position has slipped from number 72 in the Human Development Index to number 78. That means, if you measure the progress of the country by seeing how many people have access to food, how many people have access to education, how many people have access to health care, how many people have access to housing, we find that the number of people and the percentage of the population which does not have access to food, education, health, housing, etc. has grown in the last 20 years. It is true that the number of billionaires in this country has grown rapidly in the last 20 years. Today, till yesterday, 4 out of 20 of the richest 10 people were from India. 4 out of the 10 richest people in the world are from India. India has more than 50 billionaires whose combined wealth exceeds the wealth of the bottom 40% people of this country. So, this growth in GDP, this growth in national income has only led to the creation of a few multi-billionaires, people who are so wealthy, so rich, corporations who have so many assets, lakhs of crores each of these corporations have. Not just lakhs of crores, they have been allowed to acquire land of tens of thousands of people in this country, and each of these corporations have come to amass land of lakhs of hectares in this country. So, this whole model, which is just based on mindlessly increasing the rate of GDP growth, has led to a situation where the wealth of this country has come to be concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people who have come to acquire a greater and greater share of national wealth. And at the same time, the vast majority of the people have become poorer and poorer. One of the reasons why GDP growth rates have increased is because this country during this time has allowed the privatization and transfer of natural resources of this country from public hands, from the hands of the people, from the hands of the government to the hands of these private corporations. Today, national wealth, natural wealth of this country in the form of minerals, in the form of forests, in the form of water, in the form of land, is being plundered and looted by these large corporations who are selling them off, to foreign countries, to other private corporations, making lakhs of crores as profits and denuding the national wealth of this country, destroying the environment of this country, displacing thousands, tens of thousands, lakhs of poorest of the poor people in this country, mostly tribals, leaving them to starve to death. They are leaving them with only one option: either go away from your land, from your forest, from your water, which is being handed over to these corporations, and starve to death, or pick up arms and join the Maoists. Some of them have decided to join the Maoists and are fighting with the Maoists. And that is said by this government to be the biggest national security threat being faced by this country. Something which has been created, a problem which is being created entirely by the policies of this government, which is virtually pushing and forcing these people to pick up arms and join the Maoists. And then this government says that this is the greatest national security threat to this country. During the same period of last 20 years, when we followed this model of liberalization, privatization, globalization, we have also witnessed that corruption in this country has grown enormously. Till 1991, we did not hear of scams exceeding even 100 crores. Now, almost every day, we hear of scams. The 2G spectrum scam, the size of which has been estimated to be 1,76,000 crores. The 2S, or the Antriksh Devas spectrum scam, which has been estimated to be 2 lakh crores, and scams like loot of mineral resources in this country, which are in several lakh crores. Every kind of loot is going on in this country. And this has coincided precisely with this period of high economic growth. And this corruption which is going on is not only depriving the people of this country, the poorest of the poor in this country, of whatever development funds which should have gone to them, but it is also resulting in the complete corruption of public policies in this country. Policies are now being adopted which are only for the commercial benefit of these private corporations and the private people to increase their profits, because those who decide these policies receive kickbacks and bribes from these corporations. Policies are being adopted which are destroying the environment of this country, destroying public health, destroying the health of the people, only because these policies benefit the commercial interests of these corporations, from whom our policy makers are receiving bribes and kickbacks. Today our agriculture minister, Mr. Sharad Pawar, never ceases to talk and extol the virtues of genetically modified foods in this country. He says that this will bring about the third or the second green revolution in this country. He does not say how. He just wants the people to believe that this is some technology by which food production will be greatly increased. He does not point out that till today not a single genetically modified food or crop has been developed anywhere in the world which increases the production of food. There are only two types of genetically modified foods which have been developed anywhere in the world today. One is called the BT variety, in which a bacterial insecticide has been inserted into the gene of either the cotton plant or the brinjal plant or the corn plant, etc. The other is called the herbicide-tolerant variety, which has been genetically engineered to tolerate enormous amount of herbicides or weedicides which are sprayed over these plants. They are not even designed to increase food production. But Mr. Sharad Pawar keeps trying to promote these genetically modified foods, because even though the seeds of these crops cost more than 20, 30, 50 times the normal seeds, because the patents for these seeds are held by a few monopolistic corporations like Monsanto, Dow Chemicals, etc., who are notorious. These are companies who have been caught and found guilty of bribing officials of third world countries in large number of cases in a number of countries, including in India. And yet, our agriculture minister, only in order to increase the profits of these corporations and to ensure that these corporations come to enjoy a monopoly and control the agriculture of this country, he goes on day after day to extol the virtues of these, though these crops are not even designed to increase agricultural production, and though there are all kinds of problems, hazards to human health, to the environment posed by these crops, which have not been adequately studied so far. But that goes to show how policies which are drawn up and pushed by the government for the profits and for the commercial benefit of corporations are actually resulting in the destruction of public health, destruction of environment, and causing the impoverishment of the vast majority of the people. Another effect of corruption of public policies is the fact that it leads to the creation of these corporate mafia. Today, monster corporations have been created in this country. Each of these corporations has wealth and land and other resources which are in lakhs of crores. These corporations have become so powerful that they have become threats to the democracy in this country. All of you are familiar, all of you must have heard about what happened in Karnataka, where these mining barons called Reddy brothers have today got the entire democratic edifice of Karnataka in their hands. So much so that even when the Chief Minister of Karnataka wanted to remove them from the cabinet, they took all the MLAs of the ruling party with them to some resort in Goa, etc. And thereafter the Chief Minister had to kneel down before them. So these have resulted in creation of these monster corporations in this country which are so huge that even democracy is threatened by these corporations. 2 months ago, the former Russian ambassador to India wrote an article in the Hindu newspaper in which he said that Russia today has become a mafia state where there is a corporate mafia which is so powerful that even the police, any authority, nobody is able to tackle them, not even the Prime Minister or the President. And this mafia is the same mafia which was created by the corruption-ridden privatization of Russian public industries as well as Russian natural resources which took place in the early 90s. In fact, Joseph Stiglitz, the former Nobel Prize winner and the former chief economist of the World Bank, also wrote about this in his book Globalization and its Discontent, in which he had written as far back as in 2002 that Russia had become a corrupt, failed state because of the corruption caused by this privatization which took place in the early 90s, in which large part of Russian industry which was earlier owned by the government was given over to private corporations. Assets which were worth lakhs of crores were given away for a few hundred or 1,000 crores to these corporations on account of corruption which resulted in the creation of these kind of mafia corporations. Many of you would have heard about the Radia tapes. Meera Radia was or is a professionally employed corporate lobbyist for some of the largest corporations of India, which includes the Tatas, it includes Mukesh Ambani's companies and several other corporations. Recently, because the income tax department had tapped her phones, and some of these tapped conversations came out in the open in the media, what we find is a clear indication of how the country is being run, who is really running the country and in whose interest. What we find from those tapes in which there are conversations between Ms. Neera Radia, some politicians, between her and some bureaucrats, between her and some MPs, between her and some journalists. What we find is how these corporations, by using these professional lobbyists, by using these professional fixers who are paid hundreds of crores by way of fees, they are dictating government decisions, they are dictating government policy, they are dictating what will be discussed in Parliament, who will speak in Parliament. In fact, there is a very interesting conversation in the Radia tapes between Ms. Neera Radia and one gentleman who was earlier Mr. N.K. Singh, who was earlier Revenue Secretary and then Finance Secretary of this country and is now an MP. In this conversation, Mr. N.K. Singh tells Ms. Radia that there is this debate coming up in Parliament in which Mr. Pranav Mukherjee, our Finance Minister, wants to pass a bill which will give a retrospective tax concession of more than 1 lakh crore to Mukesh Ambani's company. He tells Ms. Radia that it is very important that the BJP should not oppose this bill in Parliament, because if the BJP opposes this bill in Parliament, then the Finance Minister will not be able to give this concession to his company. He keeps talking of Reliance as his company, as if this is a company owned by him. In fact, it's the other way around. It is the company which owns Mr. N.K. Singh. He says that Mr. Arun Shourie is slated to speak in Parliament, is supposed to be the first speaker in Parliament on behalf of the BJP. And he says if Mr. Arun Shourie speaks first, he will surely oppose this bill and this retrospective tax concession being given to the Reliance Industries. So he says that we must ensure that Arun Shourie does not speak first on behalf of the BJP, that in his place Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, who was earlier president of the BJP, he should speak first. He says Venkaiah Naidu is completely in our control. I know this officer of Reliance who has very good relations with him. I will fly him to Bangalore to brief Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, and we will ensure that he speaks exactly as we want him to speak in favor of this bill. And this is precisely what happens. Mr. Arun Shourie's name is removed by the BJP as their first speaker. Mr. Venkaiah Naidu's name is introduced, and Venkaiah Naidu supports this retrospective tax concession to the Ambanis, as a result of which this bill is passed. This is what these tapes show, that even discussions in Parliament, laws made by Parliament, what the media will write, will not write, everything is being dictated by these corporations through these professionally employed and highly paid corporate lobbyists and fixers. These people are really dictating what the ruling dispensation will do, whether it is the bureaucracy, whether it is the politicians, whether it is the media. Everything is being dictated by these corporations. So what we have today in this country is really a government. I mean, what we are seeing in this country is not merely crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is when, in the guise of capitalism, certain crony corporations which are close to the ruling dispensation, which are bribing and benefiting the ruling dispensation, they get all the favors of the government. What we are witnessing instead is a complete capture of the state by these corporations, as happened in Russia, which the Russian ambassador wrote about, and where all these public functionaries who are presiding over the political government, the bureaucracy and parliament, etc., all these have become marionettes or Katputlis in the hands of these corporations. During the same time, all our anti-corruption institutions in this country have been progressively weakened. If you look at what are the anti-corruption institutions in this country, they are the CBI, the CVC, the judiciary. Primarily these are the anti-corruption institutions. They have also been allowed to become corrupt. No proper institutions or systems of accountability have been established to ensure that the CBI is held accountable, to ensure that the judiciary is held accountable. At the same time, the people who are being selected to man these posts, as we saw in the case of the CVC, are people who are either corrupt, or if not corrupt, they are people who are known to be weak and pliable. So we have a progressive weakening of the anti-corruption agencies, which means that gradually the check or the disincentives against corruption are gradually and progressively being weakened and denuded. At the same time, we are seeing policies being followed by which natural resources have been privatized, monopolies have been privatized. We have seen during this time the creation of private monopolies by deliberate policies followed by the state. Electricity distribution, which is essentially a monopolistic service, has been privatized. Water distribution, which is also a monopolistic service, is being privatized. Airports, which is a monopoly, has been privatized. Roads, which are monopolies, have been privatized. And all this privatization, etc., is being done partly because of the recommendations of the World Bank and the IMF, and partly because of the influence of these corporations for whose commercial benefit it is being done. Even the World Bank and the IMF, according to Professor Joseph Stiglitz, who served as chief economist of the World Bank, he says that these organizations primarily recommend policies essentially for the corporate interests and for the corporate profits of the major multinational corporations of the West, particularly major multinational corporations based in the US. And that is why they have been recommending these kind of policies, including genetically modified foods, etc. And this government has made it official and legal to have public officials in this country, bureaucrats in this country, who are allowed to join, who are allowed to take up jobs with this IMF, World Bank while in service or immediately after retirement, as a result of which their independence, as a result of which their objectivity is severely compromised. Even if they are people who are honest in the sense that they don't take bribes, but even honest bureaucrats today look forward and hanker for World Bank and IMF jobs because they give them incomes in crores. Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who is our deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, first 15 years of his career he served in the World Bank. Then he came as economic advisor, then went on to become finance secretary, then went back as executive director IMF at a salary of 2 crores a year. Now he has come back as deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, and immediately after retirement hopes to go back as director of the IMF. Obviously, he will not be able to recommend policies, or he will not be able to objectively decide policies of this country without being influenced by this consideration that if he recommends policies which the World Bank and the IMF want to follow, then he will get a job there, otherwise he will not. This kind of revolving door of the World Bank IMF has been officially permitted by this country, which is leading to another kind of corruption of policies and decision making at the Government of India level without even direct bribe taking. A kind of official bribe taking has been, or bribe giving and bribe taking has been allowed, by which IMF and World Bank are in a sense being allowed to bribe public officials in this country officially, bribe them by way of post-retirement jobs or jobs that they take up while they are still in service, which is having an enormously deforming effect on the making of public policies in this country. So, if we look at corruption in particular from a demand side and a supply side, or from incentives and disincentives, what we find is that on the one hand, enormous incentives have been created for corruption by these policies of privatizing natural resources, privatizing monopolies, etc., because in these sectors where there are monopolies, by just bribing the regulator who allows you to increase, suppose you are an electricity distributor. I am dealing with a case of electricity distribution in Delhi, in which for this year, these private corporations who control electricity distribution in Delhi asked for an increase in tariff by 60%. Because there was an honest chairman of this Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission, when he got their accounts audited, he found so much fabrication, manipulation in their accounts. He found that they have been purchasing equipment from their own sister companies at double the price in order to inflate their costs. And he therefore, ultimately, the Electricity Regulatory Commission recommended that tariff should be decreased, electricity tariff should be decreased by 20% instead of being increased by 60%. That difference means a difference of 20,000 crores in just 1 year for these electricity corporations, these private three corporations, two owned by Reliance and one owned by Tata, who are distributing electricity in Delhi. That means if there had been a corrupt chairman, and eventually what happened was that the government stopped this tariff order by issuing an order to the Electricity Regulatory Commission not to issue a tariff order, allowed the chairman to retire. Thereafter the other two members were corrupted and they agreed to an increase of 60% in the tariff rates, which means by just bribing certain officials of the regulatory commission, you have increased the scope of profits to such an extent that 20,000 crores additional profit you can earn by giving a bribe of a few tens of crores or a few hundred crores to these public officials. Same thing about privatization of natural resources. Justice Santosh Hegde, the Lokayukt of Karnataka, has given a detailed report about the economics of mining in Karnataka, of iron ore mining, and he has pointed out that this iron ore which is being extracted from Karnataka is being exported to China for 5,000 to 8,000 rupees a ton. The cost of extraction of this iron ore is hardly 150 to 250 rupees a ton. The cost of transporting it to the port is another 150 to 300 rupees a ton. That means for a cost of 3 to 600 rupees a ton, these companies are earning 5 to 8,000 rupees a ton by way of exporting this iron ore. And what is the government of India getting? Only 27 rupees a ton by way of royalty. Less than 1/2 of 1%. And of course, in the process, you have allowed the plunder of your mineral resources, you have allowed the destruction of your forests, you have allowed the pollution of your river, you have allowed the destruction of your water sources, you have allowed the displacements of tens of thousands of tribals, and only for the benefit so that these corporations can earn profits of lakhs of crores. So by this process, you have increased the incentives for corruption enormously, At the same time, you have weakened all the disincentives by weakening the anti-corruption agencies. You are not doing anything to repair these anti-corruption agencies. We have been saying for so many years that we need an independent judicial conduct commission to hold the corrupt judges to account. Nothing has been done. Now the government has brought a bill which is totally a bogus bill called the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. Similarly, for the last 40 years we have been demanding an independent Lokpal type of institution. The government has now brought a Lokpal bill which is again a totally bogus bill by which 3 retired judges shall be appointed by the government as Lokpal. You can find any number of corrupt or pliable or weak judges to appoint as Lokpal. We have prepared a proper People's Lokpal bill in which a 11-member Lokpal will be appointed by a very broad-based selection committee, in which there will be 2 senior judges of the Supreme Court, 2 senior Chief Justices of the High Court, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, the Chairman of the Raj Sabha, all the Nobel Prize winners of Indian origin, the Bharat Ratna awardees of Indian origin, the last 2 Magsaysay Award winners of Indian origin, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the Chief Election Commissioner. All these people will be in the selection committee, and they will select these 11 members of the Lokpal in a very transparent manner. There will be complete transparency in the selection process, in which members of the public will be entitled to make nominations, will be entitled to give whatever information or comments that they have about the shortlisted candidates. So in that process, probably some good people can be selected in this Lokpal. In the government's Lokpal bill, the Lokpal cannot conduct an investigation until the Lok Sabha Speaker or the Chairman of the Raj Sabha asks the Lokpal to conduct an investigation. We have said that anybody can make a complaint to the Lokpal, and the Lokpal should be free to order an investigation wherever they want. In the government's Lokpal bill, the Lokpal can only investigate members of parliament or ministers. In our bill, they can investigate anybody, including all other public servants, the bureaucracy, the civil servants, etc. In the government's Lokpal bill, the Lokpal, even after it finds somebody guilty of corruption, can only make a report to the Speaker or to the Chairman of the Raj Sabha. We have provided that the Lokpal itself can order prosecution, can order suspension, can order fining, whatever they want, any action that they want against a public official or otherwise can be ordered by the Lokpal. We have also in our bill said that in a trial where somebody is convicted of corruption, the court will be obliged to find out how much loss the public exchequer has suffered as a result of that corruption, and that loss will be recovered from the pockets of those public officials. But unfortunately, the government does not seem to be showing any seriousness about this People's Lokpal bill. We recently had a meeting with the Prime Minister in which he promised to consider our bill, but he said, look, this must wait till the elections are over, which means till May. So, we have come to realize that unless the people of this country, the common people, particularly the youth like all of you, come together and put pressure on this government and put pressure on the authorities, all these changes that we have been demanding, whether it is the Lokpal bill, the People's Lokpal bill, or the Judicial Conduct Commission, or various other changes which are required, or changes in these policies of privatizing monopolies, privatizing public resources, natural resources, etc. All these changes will only come about if and only if the people of this country get together, engage with these issues, and tell the government very clearly and firmly that if you do not pass this bill, if you do not bring about these changes in policies, then we are going to revolt, that we are going to change this government if the government does not change the laws and its policies. And that is why it is essential, and that is why I am so happy and gratified to see this vast multitude here of youth who have come together in this youth solidarity movement. I hope that these numbers will increase. They will grow in Kerala and elsewhere across the country. I think the people of this country have realized that business cannot go on as usual anymore. If business goes on as it has been going on for the last 20 years, then this country is headed for the same fate which has overtaken Russia. In fact, if business goes on in the same way, then we will see that in this country 50-60 nuclear power plants will be set up in the next 15-20 years. This is what the Prime Minister wants to do, only for the benefit of these nuclear power corporations of the West who want to sell their nuclear power plants to India. He feels that it is his obligation to the US government, to the IMF, to the World Bank, etc., to set up this large number of nuclear power plants in this country, completely overlooking all the various hazards of nuclear power and the costs of nuclear power. Nuclear power is at least twice as expensive as conventional power, apart from being very, very dangerous. Some of you may be aware that because of this earthquake in Japan, at least 2 nuclear power plants in Japan are in serious danger of meltdown, because of which a Chernobyl type of accident is likely to take place. Even if one Chernobyl type of accident takes place, it causes damage of lakhs and lakhs of crores. It makes areas of tens of thousands of square kilometers uninhabitable for many years to come. Where nothing can be done, no agriculture, nobody can live for many, many years to come. But oblivious of all this, nuclear power is being pushed in India by this Prime Minister because it suits the commercial interests of these Western corporations who want to sell nuclear power plants to India. So my friends, the time has come for us to say that we will not tolerate these policies anymore. That if these policies are not changed and reversed and made for the benefit of the people, we will change the government. Thank you very much.